Welcome. My name is Rick Eckstein. I'm the CEO of Phase 3 Associates. I'm a proud first-generation Canadian. I'm the child of Holocaust survivors, and I'm a Canadian businessman who has spent my career building global businesses, and I've spent a tremendous amount of time in Israel and many of the Arab countries from the Mediterranean all the way to the Gulf. Today, I run our family investment office. We have businesses in Canada and Israel. And since October 7th, 2023, I've spent most of my time fighting anti-Semitism and trying to build support for the state of Israel. I've been to Israel, I think, 7 times in the last 20 months, primarily bringing non-Jews to the country to learn about the country, the people, and the geopolitics of the area. And I've learned that having people come to Israel is absolutely the best way we can educate them and tear down barriers. But we can only take so many. So today, in collaboration with our friends at the News Forum, we decided to try something new with this broadcast and bring some of Israel to you, our friends and neighbors here in North America. We're going to be interviewing some people live from Israel. We're going to try to explain what's really happening in this last week in the Israeli-Iran war, how we got here, what's unfolding on the ground, and just as importantly, what's at stake for the free world. We're going to explore the geopolitical, the strategic, and human dimensions of this war through firsthand accounts and the perspectives of individuals on the ground. We're going to have 3 speakers today, technology permitting. So let's bring in our first guest, David Weinberg. David Weinberg is an American-born, Canadian-educated, Israel-based strategic expert, a longtime observer of Iranian threats. David has served as a senior advisor to Deputy Prime Minister Nathan Sharansky and is coordinator of the Global Forum Against Anti-Semitism in the Israeli Prime Minister's office. He's the managing senior fellow at the Jerusalem-based Mishgav Institute for National Security and Zionist Strategy, a top think tank in Israel, and a leading expert on diplomatic and defense issues and columnist for the Jerusalem Post. And David is also the director of the CJA Israel office, the Canada-Israel Jewish Affairs office. So David, welcome. How are you this morning? Have the sirens been keeping you awake?
Yes, Rick, indeed they have. We were woken up twice last night. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'll try to keep my eyes open throughout this broadcast.
Okay. David, to understand today's war, I think we really have to, the current iteration of this war, I should say, we have to understand that it didn't just start 7 days ago. In her book, The Black Wave, Kim Gaddis suggests that the blame for today's Islam extremism is based on 3 events that happened in '79. Number 1, the Shah was toppled in Iran and he was replaced by Ayatollah Khomeini. She suggests this was the birth of the new Iranian regime's vision to export radical Islam revolution. The second thing that happened in '79 was the Russians invaded Afghanistan. The corollary of that is it created the Mujahideen, a battle-hardened group of Muslim warriors armed and trained by Americans, one of whom was a gentleman named bin Laden. And the third thing that she suggests started this huge round of extremism is the attack on the Grand Mosque in Mecca, which scared the Saudi leadership so much that it caused them to back the more radical elements of Islam. So let's unpack this just a little bit. How did these events of '79 lead us to where we are today, not just in Israel, but for the entire West? How did Iran become the financial and strategic backer of terrorists worldwide?
Thank you, Rick. That's a lot to unpack. Let's begin. For those who haven't been paying attention, Iran does not hide its overarching revolutionary ambitions to destroy Israel, to subdue any pro-Western states in the Middle East and dominate the region, and to export its brand of radical Islamism around the world. It constantly threatens Israel with eventual destruction. Ayatollah Khamenei, the so-called supreme leader of Iran, regularly refers to Israel as a cancerous tumor that must be removed and speaks of the complete liberation of all Arab lands in the region. And Iran has carved a corridor of control, what's called the Shiite land bridge, from the Arabian, or what they call the Persian Gulf, all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, including major parts of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and so on. Iran has equipped its proxy forces in Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza, and in the West Bank with hundreds of thousands of missiles and rockets, which they're now using to bombard Israel. And they have fomented subversion in almost every Middle East country that is somewhat associated with the United States or the Western Alliance. That includes Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and other countries. Now, Iran has buttressed this with an aggressive effort to develop nuclear weapons and an insane program to build and deploy intercontinental ballistic missiles. The latest Iranian ICBM is based on a North Korean missile design that they got with a range of 3,500 kilometers that reaches all the way to Europe. Twice in the past year, Iran bombarded Israel with these ballistic missiles, and since the beginning of this war a week ago, they've hit Israel with over 400 of these missiles. So Iran is a large, powerful, revolutionary, theologically inspired country with a bloodlust for submission of the West and the annihilation of Israel.
And David, right now there is a direct war between Iran and Israel. Up until this point, unless I'm wrong, they've always used proxies, whether it be to attack Israel or, for that matter, blowing up the U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut and the embassy in Beirut. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about what some of these proxies have done on their behalf, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this is the first time the principals are actually fighting.
Correct. As I said, over the last year, Iran directly struck Israel twice with ballistic missiles, and over the past week, they've launched this avalanche of ballistic missiles into Israel. But prior to that, as you say, Rick, their modus operandi was to work through proxy forces. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, who've basically choked off international shipping lanes through the Suez Canal over the last half a year, as well as fired missiles into Israel. And, of course, their broader revolutionary force known as the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Force and its Quds Force, which is an active terrorist militia, active all across the region and even in parts of Europe and South America. Now, over the last week, Israel has acted to counter Iran. It's been long coming. And Israel has to a great extent successfully restored its regional deterrent posture and its reputation by bravely and swiftly achieving military dominance over Iran. And Israel's clear military superiority can only be viewed, I think, with astonishment and admiration. In Washington, Moscow, Beijing, Ankara, Riyadh, and other relevant capitals. We certainly have the Iranians on the run. And this has, I think, outstanding long-term implications for a positive reset of the regional strategic architecture, bringing stability and prosperity to the entire region for the long term.
So, David, thank you, and we'll get to sort of your prognosis for the future in a moment. But I think people often forget that Iran is not just determined to wipe Israel off the map. I mean, they're what Iranians call, or the mullahs call, the little Satan. But they also have declared war on the great Satan, which is America. And I'm not sure if most people in the world realize that this is also a war between the Americans and the Iranians.
You're right. And let's be clear, this is not just Israel's war. Iran's goal has never been limited to wiping the Jewish state off the map. Its aim is to challenge and destabilize the entire Western-led world order. It doesn't just chant death to Israel, it chants death to America and death to Canada and death to Britain. It arms and directs terrorist groups, as I said earlier, that have attacked U.S. forces, targeted European interests, and disrupted global energy and trade routes. Now, for years, Israel has taken the hits so that others wouldn't have to. It's fought Iran's terror proxies on its borders. It's absorbed missile fire. It's exposed Iran's nuclear violations. All the while, the rest of the world looked the other way and lectured Israel about its aggressiveness. Now, with Iran on the point of nuclear weapons, the point of no return, really, equivocation is no longer an option. Israel's not acting alone. It's acting in defense of the entire West. And it's doing what much of the world has lacked the will to do, to confront a genocidal regime before it's too late. Israel's doing the West a favor. And the least Western leaders and countries can do is say, thank you.
David, this is, as you say, this has been a ratcheting up of tensions where Iran is threatening the West more and more, including supporting Russia and providing drone technology to them in their battle against the democratic Ukraine. They're allied with Russia, China, North Korea, and sort of this axis of evil who just love to promote chaos. On the other hand, I think Iran was feeling a lot of pressure and perhaps threatened with the Abraham Accords. They were starting to feel a little bit isolated in their own neighborhood. Did this sort of pressure on both sides lead to the October 7th massacre by Hamas of 1,500 Israelis? I mean, we know that the Iranians have been involved in training and providing them. Did this sort of all culminate in last October 7th?
It's a great question. We know now, something that we didn't know then, that Iran had crafted a grand plan, a regional plan for a assault on Israel from all directions, from Syria through Hezbollah, from Syria and Lebanon through Hezbollah, through Jordan with Revolutionary Guards forces, from Gaza with Hamas, from Yemen using the Houthis, and of course its own ambitious ballistic missile program. And it appears that Hamas jumped the gun on October 7th, 2023, by invading southern Israel on its own. This allowed Israel the luxury, if you can call it that, of combating Hamas and only Hamas first, then moved on to dealing with Hezbollah, and Israel destroyed Hezbollah's ballistic missile array and then decapitated its leadership. And next is, of course, Iran itself, which is the war that Israel's now fighting. I'll argue again that the current war is about far more than regional security or the one or another Iranian uranium enrichment facility. It's about far more than breaking up the tyrannical anti-Western axis that Iran has crafted. It really is a seismic ideological assault on the West, on the values of democracy and civil and human rights, with Israel at the forefront of this contest. And therefore, when I hear people in the West saying, this is not our war, this is not Canada's war, this is not America's war, I'm astonished. This is absolutely the West's war. And the West should at least acknowledge this, if not assist Israel in winning the battle.
You know, you're absolutely right, and it's very complicated to most people. I remember in 2012, so what's that, 13 years ago, Netanyahu standing up in the United Nations with his little prop, showing that Iran was very close to producing nuclear bombs. Nobody listened, nobody paid attention, and perhaps there'll be some lessons to be learned after the dust settles on all of this. So that kind of led us up until, call it, the last week. In the last week, as you said, Israel has been attacking Iran. Iran has been attacking Israel. I think on June 13th, there was 200 rockets. The next day, 100, then 75, then 30. 2 days ago was 25. I don't actually have the numbers for yesterday, but I think it was fairly low again, although they have definitely hit some targets last night, including the hospital in Soroka. But David, Israel appears to be winning. I think, as of now, the morning of June 19th in Toronto. Can you give us a little bit of color over the last few days? Is Israel winning, and is Iran on the ropes, or do they still have a lot in reserve, and can they absorb a lot more?
So my answer is yes to both your questions. On the one hand, Israel has done an incredible job of achieving within just a few days complete air superiority, complete dominance of Iranian airspace. By eviscerating Iran's air defenses, it's destroyed an estimated 1/3 to 1/2 of Iran's ballistic missile launchers, disabled an estimated 1/4 of Iran's nuclear enrichment and weaponization sites. It struck military targets as far away as eastern Iran near the Pakistan border. That's 2,300 kilometers away from Israel, which is a demonstration of great reach and strength. And it has, fortunately, thank God, intercepted some 90% of the Iranian intercontinental ballistic missiles. That's about 400 or 500 missiles that have been launched in Israel, along with hundreds of killer drones. Add that to the fact that Israel has eliminated a broad swath of Iranian military and intelligence leaders and terrorist operatives and struck key symbols of the Iranian regime. There are tens of thousands of Iranians fleeing Tehran. They don't want to be Israel is not targeting civilians, but of course Iran has embedded its key strategic sites inside heavily populated areas in Tehran and around the capital city. The Israeli military is operating on a pre-planned, calibrated plan to end the Iranian nuclear and missile threat to Israel. It's a calibrated plan of about 2 weeks long. Military experts around the world say that this is a classic case of success in modern warfare, multi-domain, preemptive, asymmetric, built on intelligence, using initiative, disarming, disorienting, and destabilizing the adversary, a much larger adversary, even before the war had begun. On the other hand, and with this I'll conclude, Iran is a very big, very strong, and very proud country, driven by, as we spoke earlier, radical Islamic apocalyptic ideology. And it has an estimated, or at least it had an estimated 3,000 ballistic missiles before this war began, about half of which can reach Israel. And it hasn't yet fired its heaviest, fastest, and most maneuverable missiles as Israel. And therefore, Israel is still a great risk. Some 30 Israelis have been killed in Iranian missile strikes over the past week. And Iran is firing into heavily populated civilian areas. There have been some 500 Israelis injured. There have been some 40 direct hits on residential buildings, including this morning, as you mentioned earlier, one of Israel's largest hospitals in the southern part of the country. And they've knocked out one of Israel's oil refineries as well. And I'll end by noting that all these interceptions don't come cheap. No country in the world ever has faced intercontinental ballistic missile attacks of this scale, with waves of dozens of missiles coming in rapid succession. The cost of every series of interceptions, such as the one last night, can reach as much as 1 billion shekels. That's, 400 million Canadian dollars. Of course, one has to say that this cost is justified given the destruction and the death and the pain that it averts. But Israel is in a state of emergency. Regular life has been suspended. That includes school, most workplaces, of course, all leisure sites and activities. And missile alerts are a constant feature of life, especially at nighttime, which sends millions of Israelis repeatedly to the shelters. So it is disruptive. It's frightening. It's more exhausting than you can imagine. But the Israeli public is showing rock solid support for this military effort and expressions of determination to win and many other manifestations of home front resilience. Israelis completely understand that this is not a conventional conflict, but rather an existential confrontation with a country that is determined to destroy the Jewish state of Israel.
It's incredible. You mentioned the strikes, pardon me, in eastern Iran, 2,300 kilometers away. That involves multiple, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 refueling stops for the jets in midair. And to do that, Israel must have absolute control over the air, complete and total control of the air over Iran. So it is pretty incredible. David, in 20 minutes or 25 minutes, you brought us from 1979 to 2025. So thank you. Stay on the screen, please. And I'm going to just give you a break for a moment while we bring in our next 2 guests. So Adam Zivo is Serbian born. He's based in Canada. He's a weekly news columnist at the National Post and a contributor to In Magazine, where he focuses on geopolitics, the Ukraine, and the Middle East affairs. He's a freelance journalist. He's a filmmaker, content creator, geopolitical analyst who works with NATO-affiliated NGOs. Adam spent a long time reporting from the Ukraine during that war in the beginning. And Adam is right now actively reporting from Israel, doing reports for the National Post and for the News Forum. We're also joined by Zina Rakhamilova. She has a Russian background and she's now based in Tel Aviv. Zina is a communication strategist with a lens on Israel society, resilience, and public discourse. She's a regular contributor to the National Post and Israel Hayom, offering sharp analysis on Middle Eastern affairs and Israel's global standing. She's an active presence on social media platforms, and we welcome both of you. Adam, I was going to start with you, but I'm going to actually start with Zina, if you don't mind, Zina. You literally have just come out of Soroka Hospital, where you've had a tour of all the damage and destruction from last night's blast. Could you talk to us about that, please?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. And I'm actually speaking to you still from Beersheba right now. Just not 10 minutes ago, I just left the Soroka Hospital, and it's unspeakable. It's crazy how intense the devastation is. We actually went to the specific area where the ballistic missile had impacted, and it is a miracle. It is an absolute miracle that the exact ward where it hit was evacuated yesterday. It makes you feel that somebody is watching over you. But the footage that we took, and the water pipes had burst, and so it's really unspeakable. And just so you know, Soroka Hospital is one of the largest hospitals in southern Israel. Because it's located so close to the Gaza border, it's treated thousands of Gazans in the past, because Israel has equipment and capabilities that are not so available within Gaza. And this is a hospital where both Arabs and Jews work and are treated in. And so this hospital really is the epicenter of what coexistence is in Israel. It's Arabs and Jews working together to save lives and treating each other. And the Islamic regime does not care. It targets civilian populations and it targets hospitals. So it's really I'm still trying to process it. It's unspeakable what I just saw.
You look a little shook up, so thank you for still being able to join us. And we'll let you catch your breath for one moment. Adam, always a pleasure to see you. I know you're an expert on media, particularly social media and all sorts. What are you seeing on the ground with your own eyes that the Canadian media is either missing or distorting?
What I would say is that the mood on the ground is far calmer than what most international media outlets would suggest. In Tel Aviv, over the past few days, people were on the beach, enjoying their lives, going to cafes, and for the most part, trying to live as normally as possible. And this is important to note for a variety of reasons. First of all, it indicates that the Israelis are resilient and that they are not terrified, they are not panicking. And that indicates that it will take much more than the current attacks to break Israel's resolve. Uh, this sense of perverse normalcy that you'll see in some parts of Israel during the war is an act of defiance, right? It is a way for people to show that they will not let themselves be dominated by Tehran psychologically. They will not allow Tehran to destroy them physically and spiritually as well. But on top of that, this has played into a larger battle regarding the narrative of this war. So Iran and their supporters want to create this impression that Tehran is winning. And so they've created a large number of AI images that give the false impression that Tel Aviv has been destroyed, comparing Tel Aviv to Gaza, creating false images, claiming to be the headquarters of the Mossad, saying that the Israeli intelligence apparatus has been decapitated. They actually misspelled Mossad in that AI generated image. And so it's important to push back and to show that that is not the case and that the destruction, while real, is far more limited than what the Iranians and some media outlets would like to suggest. Now, I don't want to be facetious and I don't want to trivialize the suffering that does exist, but I do want to contextualize it because many people who have not been through war imagine that war is like a video game, that everything is terrible all at once, right? But the fact is that life does go on. People do find a way to find normalcy, even in the most abnormal of experiences. And that's very human. And we need to recognize that if we were to understand the psychological dynamics of this war, which is something that is often underappreciated.
I know you saw a lot of this in Ukraine, where I think all of this AI and misinformation was really practiced on a large scale by the Russians. Going back all the way to October 7th and shortly thereafter, every time there was a hit on somewhere in Gaza, social media would blow up. There was that alleged hit on the hospital that turned out it wasn't caused by the Israelis, it was caused by Hamas themselves. And Melanie Joly, one of our cabinet ministers, still has a post on her Twitter that says, Israelis hit hospital, 500 killed. This misinformation, it is becoming misinformation, disinformation. I expect it from the bad guys, but when you see Western politicians who are spreading it too, that makes it very, very scary. And I'm not sure how we can fight against that.
It is difficult, and AI has made it increasingly trickier to discern what is real and what's not real. So, for example, on X, over the past few days, I'm not sure exactly when this post came out, but there was an image showing a rain of missiles onto a city in the night. It looked like a meteor storm. And the post claimed that this was Tel Aviv, once again implying that the Israelis were being pummeled by Iran and thus losing the war. That was exposed as AI. But the problem, though, is that when the community note, which is a system that's used in Twitter to indicate, to provide context to posts, by the time that community note was added to that post to clarify that this was AI, it was too late. Many people had seen the image and they gotten the incorrect belief that Israel is being completely wiped out. When I posted accurate footage showing people relaxing on the beach in Tel Aviv, which was meant to illustrate the resilience of the Israeli population, that really pissed off many of the pro-Iranian accounts. And they began to flood into my comments and claim that this was old footage or it was fake. And so not only do we have fake footage that is being portrayed as real, we have real footage that people are claiming is fake. And some of them said it was AI generated. Now, an element to this disinformation swamp that I think is slightly underappreciated is how people are now relying on AI to fact check posts that they see. And I'm going to use that post that I made earlier as a case study. So, I posted some footage of Tel Aviv to provide some context as to what's really happening on the ground, how people are not, crying all the time. And a large number of pro-Iranian accounts chimed in and they asked Grok, which is the AI chatbot run by X, whether this footage is real or not. And the fact is that an AI chatbot does not have the capacity to discern whether a piece of footage is real or not, unless it's really obvious, right? And so this chatbot, because it wasn't able to answer the question, it hallucinated. It made things up, as AI is prone to do. And so it gave inconsistent answers. To some people, it said this was likely real. To some people, it said not. It used a lot of conjecture. And then you had all these people saying that, oh, this is fake. This is Israeli disinformation. And I think that this is the first time I've seen in a war where AI fact checking is leading to more disinformation rather than less. And I think that that's concerning and something that we should keep our eye on as this conflict develops.
Go back to you for a moment, Zina. I hope you've caught your breath. You still look a little shook up. Adam talked about people on the beach. The people of Israel have been effectively at war for 20 months now. Can you talk to us a little bit about both the morale of the country, the morale of the people, and perhaps that's even changed this morning a little bit, but hopefully you can give us a general idea. And how's the economic strain affecting daily life and public unity? Because I know people are not working, businesses have been closed, et cetera, et cetera. So give us a little bit of color of what the people of Israel are feeling, please.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo the resilience message, because even meters from where the missile impacted in Tel Aviv, a bunch of local coffee shops have still opened up, even though their windows are still smashed and shattered. And so people are still sitting, people are still trying to gain some sense of routine. But it's mixed with this element of new normal, because we continue our day to day, but then we are all running. The entire neighborhood has to run down into a bunker. But like you mentioned, it's been 20 months of this. We are definitely fatigued, but the Israeli public opinion on this war has never been more unanimous and stronger. I would say that after October 7th, even though the majority of Israelis did support the war, there was a lot of anger and animosity towards the government for their failure in protecting Israel and for the insane security failure that we had to endure on that day. Versus now, the government is actually taking an active preemptive strike on Iran, and the entire Israeli public supports this. And although we're exhausted and we haven't slept in a week, we know that this is what needs to be done in order to finally disarm Iran and finally get rid of their nuclear program and finally stop the constant barrage of rockets that we've been subjected to for 20 months from its proxies. And so we really feel right now that we're going after the head of the snake, and we're trying to, deal with our day to day. I do want to mention that yesterday, during one of the sirens, one of the missile barrages, I went into a very big underground parking garage, and people have set up tents, people have set up mattresses, people have set up mats. There are people that are giving out supplies. So there is a massive sense of community in the underground bunkers that a lot of us have to go to if we don't have the traditional bomb shelters. In terms of economy, slowly things are opening up. I don't want to say that there hasn't been a strain on the economy and the sort of resolve that a lot of people have had to endure, because you've had so many people that have had to stop their lives abruptly and join the reserve and deal with the war on so many fronts at this point. But, we are picking ourselves back up. Morale is strong. Community is strong. And it really is, powerful, because I don't know how many nations would have been able to do what Israel is doing right now.
Okay, thank you. And David, I was there with you a couple of weeks ago. This war has been going on for about 600 days. We've met reservists who have been serving 300, 400 days. It seems like the Air Force has been running 24/7 for the last 20 months. What shape is the military in from a people perspective? Are they getting tired? Are they still as effective as they were? Give me a little bit of color on that, please.
Yeah, I can speak both from personal family experience as well as a broader analytical perspective. I have three sons and two sons-in-law, all of whom have been in active duty over the last 2 years. They're all reservists. They're older. Each of them has a family with kids of their own. And some of them have had to break away for close to 400, 450 days over the last 2 years to serve on a range of fronts, from the northern border with Lebanon to the northern West Bank, the southern West Bank, and Gaza itself in southern Israel. And yes, it is exhausting. It's exhausting for their families as much as it is for them. And this is a very trying period. And I'm not going to mention the thousand or so soldiers killed and the 15,000 soldiers injured, some with long time life-changing injuries. But there is, as Zina was saying earlier, a tremendous sense of commitment and a resilience that still cuts across broad swaths of Israeli society. People are, most of them, showing up for a fourth or fifth tour of military reserve duty with all the difficulties involved. And it's a great challenge. Yes, the Israeli army is missing soldiers. We need another one or two divisions. There are some deep societal disagreements in Israel relating to the place of Arabs in Israel and the ultra-Orthodox Jewish sector of Israel, neither of which participates, broadly speaking, in military service. And those are sore issues. You'll see them come to the fore when Israel goes next year into another election campaign as scheduled. But by and large, our society is struggling and managing. The Israeli army is strong, as we've seen in recent months and certainly over the last week, and intends to win.
So just a few questions here, and you you guys can decide who wants to answer. There's going to be some power vacuums, assuming this continues in the same direction. What regional actors might step in? We've got vacuums in Lebanon and in Syria, with the supporters of Hezbollah and Hamas. Are we going to see Turkey try to step up? Is there anybody else that's going to try and fill some of these vacuums? Who wants to take that one?
I'll make a stab at that, Rick. The answer to your question is implicit in your question. Indeed, there are other would-be hegemons in this region. President Erdogan, I should say dictator Erdogan of Turkey, being the one of the leading culprits, one of the leading candidates, who would be very happy to see the Shiite hegemons in Iran pushed back so that he can move in. Turkey already occupies a broad swath of northern Syria. Nobody in the world talks about that. And would like to extend his sway across Syria and Lebanon all the way down to the border with Israel as well. The better option, the preferred option, and this is something you hinted at the beginning of our conversation, Rick, is for a coalition of like-minded, Western-oriented, relatively moderate countries, led by Saudi Arabia and Israel, along with Egypt, Jordan, some of the Gulf monarchies, Morocco and others, to form a broad regional, strategic, and moral alliance. There's a name for it already, the Abraham Accords, which were launched just 4 or 5 years ago. I believe that in the wake of an Iranian defeat, which is coming, the path will open for an expansion of these Abraham Accord alliances, something that can bring renewed stability and prosperity to the entire region.
If I can add to that, I will. If I can add to that, I will. Yeah. No, I think I agree with everything that was said. I do think that this is a very important time for the global community to actively encourage the people of Iran as well to take back their own country, because the best way to avoid any type of unwanted power vacuum is to ensure that the people themselves are emboldened to overthrow this regime and take back this country. And it's one of the reasons why I would assume that the US has been hesitant to get involved and why Israel has yet to really go after the Ayatollah or political figures, because we want to avoid the power vacuum. Right now, the stated goal for Israel is to eliminate the nuclear program, not necessarily regime change. It would be great if the Ayatollah and all the political leadership were gone, and who knows what will happen in the coming days. But we want more than anything for the people of Iran to take back their own country and for their to transition themselves into a democracy after the fact.
And Adam, thank you,
I
Zina.
wanna-
Adam, you're on the streets. Are people still talking about Gaza and Lebanon at the moment, or is it all Iran? What are people saying?
It's all Iran, so people have completely forgotten about Gaza, at least the people who I engage with. And what I really want to emphasize is that Israelis show a great deal of sympathy towards Iranians. They understand that Iranians are not represented by the Islamic regime. They show a great deal of respect for Persian civilization, for Persian history, and they understand that this great civilization has been hijacked by radicals over the past few decades, and that many Iranians do not identify with this strain of Islam, which is alien to them. And so they are broadly rooting for a new regime that can allow Iran to be free, to be democratic, and to peacefully coexist with Israel. Now, the question is whether or not that's realistic. And one thing that I've noticed in the discursive spaces that I operate in, there tends to be an overestimation of the public support in Iran for the Shah's grandson. And I think that some people have latched onto this idea that this figure will be the cure-all for the political problems that we see in Iran, that people will rally around him. But while the Shah himself, at least, is seen as an okay figure by some of the Iranian diaspora friends that I have, the grandson is seen as being a much more questionable figure. And one thing I do want to emphasize is that if we do want a democratic transition within Iran, we have to make sure that we don't piss off the average Iranian citizen and that we have to minimize civilian casualties. What I'm hearing from all of my Iranian friends is that their families back home are terrified and they hate the regime, but they hate seeing their cities bombed as well. And so if we go too hard here, if we punish the Iranian people for the sins of their government, then we will end up in an endless cycle of violence. Because sure, the Ayatollah may be ousted, but his successor will be just as anti-Western and anti-Israel if that reflects a broad resentment within the population.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a very good point. We're reaching the top of the hour, so I've got 2 questions left that I'd like each of you to weigh in. And I guess this one, as much as hope as anything else, because my crystal ball is a little fuzzy. Israel tends to go in cycles. There's peace, there's less peace, there's violence, a war, and then the cycle starts again. From what we're seeing, is this going to be just another cycle, or is this going to maybe extend the periods between periods of war? Or does it look like we actually might have something coming out of this that could be a lasting peace and we could all claim a little bit of victory? Maybe, David, would you like to go first on that? And perhaps the Abraham Accords is the answer.
I think the answer to your question, Rick, really depends on our nerve. And I say our in the broadest global sense of the word. You look at the anemic response of Western leaders at the G7 summit in Canada just a couple of days ago to the war with Iran. Ceasefire and de-escalation were their watchwords. Yes, they called Iran a source of regional instability and terror and affirmed the right of Israel to its self-defense, but then they swiftly segued into their default defeatist mode of calling earnestly for a ceasefire. I think there is a chance here for something far more dramatic and long-lasting, a reset in the regional strategic architecture, which for too long has been has suffered under the shadow of the Iranian hegemonic advance across the region and its nuclear bomb effort. And I think that Israel is doing something here which makes it the great generator of moral purpose and strategic clarity. And if the West writ large, not just Washington under President Trump, but other Western leaders show some grit and some purpose and back Israel up in its struggle against this genocidal country, against Iran, we have the opportunity here to make a sea change in the region, not something that will just bring us back to another round of warfare several years from now. I think that Israel's principled global leadership should be celebrated, not dismissed, should be backed, not criticized, and we have a chance for something much better and much more long-lasting.
I think I'm hearing from you, David, that if the West wakes up just a little bit more, you can see a light at the end of this tunnel. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, what the West should be saying is thank you to the state of Israel for your formidable clarity in fighting for Western civilization and its values, thanking for saving the West from its own lethargy and confusion. We have the chance to create something so much better, so much more stable, so much more prosperous for the Iranian people, for Gulf Arabs, for North African Arabs, for Israel, for Jews in this country, really for the whole world.
Zina, you're up next.
Yeah.
What do you think? Are you feeling some hope? Are you seeing that there could be some lasting peace in here? Try and leave me on a hopeful note.
Yeah, I think as an Israeli who has been living here for 7 years, I just celebrated my 7-year mark here. I've never, ever been more proud to be Israeli, never been more proud to be part of a country and a nation that is willing to do the dirty work, the work that is required in order to keep Western civilization alive. It's astounding to see how many Israelis, how much bravery you've seen in the last week or so. And there's no way to really predict what the future holds. But what we have seen in the last 2 years, October 7th was one of the most devastating days. The shock and trauma associated with it will stay with all of us in the Jewish and pro-Israel Western world forever. But from that day, look at how different the Middle East looks like. It's astounding, and it's all because of the military action that Israel has had to take because of that dreadful day. Hezbollah has been, close to eviscerated. We've seen a much weaker Hamas that many people in the security apparatus in Israel are saying can never repeat October 7th again. Syria looks like a completely different country now. And for the first time, they've allowed Israel to use their airspace to intercept some of the missiles that are being launched. So we are looking at a very different Middle East that came from one awful, awful, awful day. And so I'm hoping that after this period that we're going to see a completely new, better, happier Middle East.
Okay. It's very interesting. You all come from such different backgrounds. David, America, Canada, Israel, Zina, I think Russia, Canada, Israel, Adam, you've been everywhere. You've lived in so many different countries. So you're all coming at this with slightly different lenses. What do you see, Adam, in the future? Do you see some hope? And I know you've been there for 2 weeks now. Give me something to hang on to.
I would say that I feel fairly hopeful that this area will become a bit more stable because, as we know, these more moderate Middle Eastern states that have normalized their relationships with Israel, they build a relationship with Israel when they feel that Israel can be relied upon as a security partner. And so for Israel to so effectively prosecute this war against Iran, I think is reassuring for countries like Saudi Arabia. And so though the Abraham Accords were thrown off slightly with October 7th, with Saudi normalization being put on the back burner. I would hope that Israel's victory over Iran would restart that process and re-energize it. However, when it comes to the longer term, the big question is what happens with Iran, right? Are we going to see this regime replaced with a democratic government that is willing to play nicely with its neighbors? If so, that would be great. I would love to see, renewed peace in the Middle East. That would be all of our dreams. But if we don't achieve that and we just have a revolution and an equally terrible regime installed as its replacement, then I feel much more pessimistic, obviously. And even if we destroy Iran's nuclear program and they don't have any nukes with them, that doesn't change the fact that, it's a country of 90 million people. It's geographically huge. It has abundant natural resources. It's evidently been able to destabilize the Middle East without nuclear weapons already. So should they take some time to regroup and relitigate its old grievances, let's say in 10 to 20 years from now, I think that would be concerning. And we know how quickly things can change. The Middle East that we see of today is dramatically different from the Middle East of 10 years ago or 20 years ago. I mean, we see the same thing in Europe, where the Europe of today is so different from 5 years ago. So I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that Iran could become the big, powerful bad guy again in a generation, even if they don't have nukes.
I asked you to leave me on a hopeful note, but that one's maybe a little more realistic. Anyways, I want to thank all of you. We're at the top of the hour. I know you're all busy. Thank God we didn't have any sirens and nobody had to run to an air raid shelter while we were doing this. But thank you all very much for your time, for your observations. Stay safe, pay attention when the sirens go off, and make sure that you look after yourself. So again, thank you all very, very much. I also want to take just a moment to thank my team here at Phase 3 and to thank our friends at the News Forum for producing this for us. We're going to be pushing it out on all of the News Forum's platforms, plus hopefully the three of you can push it out on your platforms. To all those who are listening in, hopefully we were able to bring a little bit of Israel to you and let you feel and hear from people who are there, who've huddled in bomb shelters, who've walked through the wreckage, and yet who are still, that resilient word, seem to be still very strong and carrying on with their lives. I think there's a couple of takeaways that I've taken from this is, number one, appeasement doesn't work. We saw it with Chamberlain in the Second World War, and we've seen so many times over the last 50, 60 years where we've just contained, we haven't actually won. And just think if we had won in Iran and attacked them 12 years ago before they had all of these ballistic missiles. So that's one of my takeaways is we have to confront tyranny head on, do it once and do it right. And my second one, and you all commented on this a little bit, you in particular, David, is my understanding of the indignation that some Israelis must feel by having to do the West's work for them. We're slow learners in the West, but I hope we've learned a valuable lesson and that there may be peace in the Middle East. I'm Rick Eckstein. Thank you very much for watching. Send in your comments, and we'll let you know if we're going to do something like this again. Thank you all very much.